Hello, everyone. This is Luke Renda here, and today I have with me Chance Garton, the host of InnerVerse Podcast, Vibrant, Marvelous Demystifiers. He also goes on the Weaving Spiders Welcome, Weaving Spiders Webs now, I guess. And he's just a really awesome guy with so much to share. I'm really happy to have him on here with me today.
Hey,
How's it
Luke,
going,
thanks for
Chance?
having me on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on here. Why don't you do a little introduction of yourself briefly, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure, man. Yeah, there's a lot of things I could talk about, but if I was to encapsulate what my daily life is like, I definitely make a lot of podcasts, as you mentioned there. I've got 3 of my own shows going currently. Love coming on as a guest for other people's like this right here. So I'm really looking forward to see what we flow into and like to make a lot of art whenever I have time. And I also do tuning and oracle cards. I guess oracle cards is maybe a misnomer. It's more like I Ching and tarot focused with maybe some other things thrown in, but the tunings are a really big part of my life right now. I work with probably 3 clients a week on average with that, and it's amazing modality that people are familiar with me. I'm sure they've heard me talk about quite a lot, but even though I know that it's effective, it continuously blows my mind with some of the results and experiences people have with that. So that's like using tuning forks to balance the energy field of a client, and there's a whole methodology to that. But probably the biggest part of my life has got to be InnerVerse, which you can find at innerversepodcast.com. Weekly episodes, always learning a lot from my guests there and enjoying the life that it lets me live to be following and pursuing these things that I'm so fascinated by and that make my make me get all fired up and feel spiritually aligned in my life. It's really great.
Yeah, you can find Chance on Rockfin and Patreon. Rockfin's good too, but Patreon has so many episodes that go back many years, which for $5 a month or whatever, it's pretty good deal, I would say. Even going back 2 or 3 years, Chance's episodes are like top quality. Even before his video days, his audio is really good. He's a great interviewer. He has a lot of great guests. I suggest you check him out.
Hey, thanks for saying that. Yeah, I think that a large portion of my audience really found me during the 2020 times, and moving to a video format was really helpful. But the quality of the content before that, I agree that it was pretty good, and some of that doesn't really have as many views or downloads or whatever. And I would be stoked to see people go back into the archives and dig up some of the gems there.
Yeah, I go back every once in a while. I think I caught like maybe it was probably about last year. I caught an old episode with you and Ross Ben, and it was excellent. Must have been in 2019 or something like that. And yeah, there's so much. And the thing is, the information is still relevant now. It's not like it's dated by sort of topical stuff. It's almost like this eternal knowledge that you have there. So it's not like you'd be going back and wasting your time listening to a bunch of topical things. They're really relevant even now to go back and listen to. So I highly suggest you check it out.
Very cool, man. That is definitely the intention, is to create something that is going to be useful and fascinating at any point in the timeline. Really honing in on the now, but not in the topical news cycle sense, but in the eternal, what is actually the eternal present, right?
Yeah, and you have like some of the episodes you have like Emily Ridout on where you talk about maybe the transits of astrology and stuff like that, which would maybe be like, I guess, dated a bit, but it's like you still get to learn about the zodiac and you learn about that type of stuff through listening to it. So, and if you support Chance, he continues to make more awesome work, which, and then he helps other people get their work out there. And it's kind of like this perpetual cycle of prosperity, I kind of feel like.
Absolutely. One of my first and foremost goals when I started the show was I wanted to be able to like take somebody who had information and perspective and give it to more people than they were able to reach. And it took some work, had to put in the years of building a foundation and the skill set and and connecting to making these many serendipitous connections as possible to the wider community and all of that. But now I'm happy to say that that does happen. When somebody comes on, they might get like a little bump in their book sales, or a few clients will come their way and new subscribers and all that. And I love it how in this field, you could call it, there's way more, it's way more cooperative than competitive, that we are all helping each other. When we individually rise, it brings up the sea level for everybody.
That's yes, the one thing, especially with Chance, is yeah, helping everyone out, getting that information out there. Like what you did with Dylan, for instance, is so amazing. I remember you mentioning Dylan way back, Dylan Sakosio, before you'd met him or anything like that, and you just kind of suggest him to a podcast. And then his work starts getting a little more popular. And then now he's writing another book, like maybe that wouldn't have happened without you. And it's yeah, it's super cool. I kind of feel like like as human beings in this realm, we're kind of like a prosperity generating organism, in a way. Like we can constantly like perpetuate more and more prosperity for everyone. And one thing I forgot to mention was Chance has the best audience. There is no like infighting or bickering. It's all a lot of support. And if someone has a different opinion, they'll voice their opinion, but it's not in like a weird argumentative way that you'll see on a lot of other shows. Actually, people, like I've seen even on like Beth Martin's show, like one of her guests will be like arguing with someone in the chat. It's too funny. Whereas your shows, like everyone is super supportive. It's really great.
Thank you for saying that. I pretty much 100% agree. I say pretty much. There's no pretty much about it. I 100% agree. The audience is incredible and very, well, like just not trolly, but there's a particular strategy for that I've employed, which is in the off occurrence, which is very rare that somebody does come in with a combative vibe, or just like in some way the energy is off and I can tell. I just block generously and forget about it instantly. And to me, like that, like we're to some people out there, especially content creators who are wanting to connect with more people, that might seem counterintuitive. Like, oh, I want to be perceived and liked, perceived as open and facilitating communication and not censoring or whatever. But it's like, it's my house, and if I want to keep them and maintain this type of energy in the space, then you got to look at what you're doing as, especially in this, like what you're doing as a podcast host, right? That you are providing the value and the audience is coming to benefit from the value that you're providing. And in the exception of like, if they're also your supporter, that then it's a completely one-way transaction in terms of who's providing who value. So if somebody comes into the space and is the opposite of valuable, I'd have no I have no hesitation to just like, goodbye, and there's a bazillion people out there to potentially connect to who are going to do exactly what we all want, which is a collaborative energy, a supportive energy, a curious and open-minded energy. And it's not about not being allowed to have a difference of opinion. It's just like, don't be a total jerk or even insinuate that you want to fight, because I'll just boot you instantly and I don't lose any sleep about it. It kind of reminds me of back in the day when I used Fedbook, and there would be somebody who would come on to my post and make some kind of argumentative comment, and then the rest of the day I'd be thinking about like, well, I should just type this to them, and like it's just sticking in my head. It's like fucking demons in there. And when you just block and forget about it, all of that energy, it's almost like there's some metaphysical quality to the block and the ban feature online. You're like closing the door. I'm not going to argue with this person. I'm not going to fight about this. No toxicity necessary, and it works out really great. It's sort of like, not that I'm calling them human weeds or anything, but you're definitely pruning the garden. And I think that's the trap that a lot of creators fall into, is they aren't willing to set those type of boundaries with people, or they look at it like, I need the audience. I need more people. I need this person who just showed up who I have no idea who they are, and they're kind of causing trouble. But maybe if I'm diplomatic enough, I can smooth it out. But, maybe in some cases you could, but most of the time they're not there to be diplomatic themselves. And so yeah, you just do what you got to do and move on with your life and forget about it. And then you end up having quality over quantity, but the quantity will show up too the more the quality is there. So that's sort of my strategy with that.
Big part of the slogan. You got to hack that tentacle off, right? That's what that blocking is online. It's like they're like trying to get their tentacles into you and like start sucking you dry like some mosquito.
Yeah, it's basically energy vampirism, but on a cyber level. And it's completely the case. And you know it's the case if you sit there like going throughout your day and the interaction is still in your head where you're still trying to figure out the best possible comeback or whatever. You're getting
Right.
juiced at that point.
Yeah, wasting your energy on that. And the whole thing is, if you have something to argue about, like instead of arguing with a content creator, create your own thing, put it out there, and then see what happens, right? Create your own argument, create your own video about why you disagree with someone, and just put your information out there instead of trolling people and putting weird hexes on them or whatever.
Most people that are doing the whole psychic vampirism thing of any form, it's more of like a unconscious survival method that they feel like they're getting energy out of it, and they may not even realize that that's what's leading them into that behavior. But there are occasionally people that have figured out the whole energy vampirism thing as a strategy, do it on purpose. And that's something I've spent a lot of time looking at, researching, and it's not, it's probably not talked about enough because clearly there are a lot of people that are still willing to suffer the vampire to live, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. What is that doctor whose book you always recommend on psychic vampirism? You did a presentation on it one time because I would really like to get that book actually. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Oh yeah, this is a fascinating book right here. It's called Psychic Vampires by Joel Slate.
Joe H. Slate.
I always say Joel, but it's Joe. I don't know why I
Yeah.
throw the L in there. Yeah, and this guy did amazing research on the whole topic using stuff like Kirlian photography and just like basic questionnaires, and would invite people into his sort of laboratory environment to talk to them about their experiences with energy vampirism, or even he found self-proclaimed energy vampires to discuss their strategies with them. And if you look online about like for books about this subject, you'll probably find as many books telling you how to do it as there are books about like how to protect yourself from it. So it's definitely a thing. It's
Wow, that's
definitely a thing.
crazy. How to be a psychic vampire. That's what
Yeah.
they're selling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It's popular in occult circles that
That's crazy,
are
bro.
not really interested in morality and just interested in power and energy.
Right.
It's pretty wild, but yeah, I think that that's where the myth of the vampire mostly comes from, is the energy vampirism. But I really appreciate Eileen Day McCusick, her take on it. She's the tuning fork lady, wrote Electric Body, Electric Health, and Tuning the Human Biofield. I've learned a ton from her. And she puts it simply, oh, yeah, you got yourself a sonic slider right there.
Mm.
Very good. Yeah, she says be an electron donor, not an electron stealer. Because there's an actual, even back to this book by Slate, when he was doing the Kirlian photography, which is like aura photography of people who had been recently psychically vampirized or themselves were doing it to others. It's really wild, but there are like tendrils of darkness in the aura that actually reach out and puncture the other person's aura. And you can see like a luminosity difference dramatically between someone who has been, hasn't been energy vampirized. And I'm not talking about it to like freak people out or scare them, but just to let them know that whenever you, it's a basic tenet of life that you can follow. What gives you the feeling of more energy and clarity is good for you, and what makes you feel dull and confused or unclear is bad for you. And that definitely applies for interactions with other people. The problem is, after getting juiced, because you have less clarity mentally, you're less likely to notice or be aware of why or how that happened, and sort of a can become like a vicious pattern or vicious cycle. And the healing and repair from hardcore energy vampirism, like in cases of domestic partnership with, that is a huge component that he talks about in this book, is how people and their romantic partners will vampirize each other all the time. It's kind of like as simple as in those cases being always in a competition to win the point of like arguments and things like that. There's an energy transfer in that whole thing too. So it is much more helpful to cultivate an environment of communication where it's just about seeing and recognizing the other person's point without needing them to accept yours and be the winner. You know, keeping score in general in friendships or partnerships is a road towards that exact outcome of winners and losers. And even the thing about the psychic vampires is that in this research by Slate, he demonstrates how the whole practice is actually wrecking the vampire's energy system as well. It is messing up their internal connection to life force and generating chi or prana, because they're constantly looking for it in an external. So it's like atrophying their own natural connection to the source energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I noticed that that's another cool thing about the people you have and guests you have on and the group that you're involved with, is that even when you have different opinions, you don't really argue. You're like, oh, this is how I feel, this is how I feel, cool. It's kind of like that middle path rather than this like these extremes on either end, and that's, again, that's just like a healthier way of going about something, right?
It is. It is. I understand the criticism of the whole like yes and improvisation style of research, and in particular exploring symbolism, because it depends on, I don't know, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you want to know exactly what the ancients thought one thing or another symbolized or meant, there is a definite system there. But then over time, these hyper sigils take on more and more connections to more and more concepts and things. And at the end of the day, like what is helpful is to do the three strikes idea, in terms of if you think something is related to another thing or means another thing, then if you can find many examples of that, in particular from like art or architecture or writing from an older time, then you've probably found something that's a useful and legitimate connection. You brought up Ross Ben. He likes to say all the time, consistency is the hallmark of truth. But just because in a conversation we may throw ideas around that end up not sticking with consistency, I don't look at that as a disservice to the audience. There is a real issue, and I see this a lot. I'm getting more and more sensitive to it, that people, myself included, people will hear information in a conversation like this and take it as gospel because, like, oh, I heard it on a podcast, so it must be coming from an expert. They must know what they're talking about. But once you get up here and start doing this, like we're doing right here, and you meet the people who are the popular talking heads, you realize they're no different than the people listening, except that they made the decision to output and not just completely have input. So don't believe everything you hear, even from me, because I'm very well likely will change my mind about things later on. I'm more interested in opening doors for people in their minds to look into stuff for themselves and figure out what experientially gives them, again, something or things that, or perspectives or mindsets or information that gives them a feeling of having more energy than they had before, being more excited about life, more interested in what they can learn or do or achieve, right?
I definitely think your podcast is nailing that. Every time I listen to it, I'm so fired up. I'm like, this guest was great. I can't wait to check them out. Oh, this, that, chance. One thing you're saying about like the psychic vampires is like staying more sensitive rather than being desensitized, right? And then you can sort of pick up on more of these subtle keys. But one thing I want to talk to you about is over synchronizing things. You know what I mean? Like you have this syncretism that you always talk about, you and Dylan, right? And sometimes you can like almost, it can be like too much syncretism where everything becomes the same, right? And so whereas I had this project on archetypes, I didn't get it done yet. I was trying to do it last week. It would be, I could reference to it, but like there is the archetype, which is like Plato's forms, like the idolas. And then how we see this archetype is through its archetypal image, which it projects. So an archetype is actually just like a symbol forming structure, and we can only see it through its manifest symbols. But then once you take these symbols and you scrutinize it with your consciousness, it becomes what Jung calls, or Levi Brule called, representations collectives, which would be like the cultural interpretation of the archetype given like a more specific form. So it's kind of like, you bring up Seven Sermons of the Dead sometimes, and it's like the pleroma is undifferentiated. These archetypes are a little more differentiated, but still not where we can like have a complete idea of what it is. We only see it through its manifest forms. And then that archetype becomes an archetypal image. And then it becomes a fairy tale or a myth or something like that, which actually has cultural significance. So like to bring up this example, it would be like Odin. Like Odin is a mercurial character, but he is not Thoth. He's not Hermes, but he is still like a mercurial character like those guys. But it's like, Odin rips out his eye to drink from the well of his uncle. Like, I don't remember when Thoth had one eye, but I'm not an expert on ancient Egypt either. So it's like, do you know what I'm trying to say here? I'm trying to like work within that sort of thing. There is syncretism, it's obvious. There's a lot of allegories for the sun and all this stuff, but then it eventually takes on its own specific meaning for the people that for thousands of years that was a symbol for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And I will actually, my perspective is that Odin is Buddha, is Mercury, is Jesus, is Thoth, and that the mythology or the dressings of the story may change. But think it's exactly what you're saying. There's the undifferentiated all, the beingness, the one, and then I mean, think about it, the one, right? Well, Odin is odd, the odd one out, the alone one, Solus, which is the sun. And as the as you get descended down from just the pure beingness of the one, the like the angle that you're taking of looking at it, if you will, facets of the reflection of the source light are going to take on different parts of the story are going to change a bit as you come down to different cultures and different people and places. But I do think like the odd in Odin is the same as the odd in God. And it's very easy to change an O to an A. Just think about, I mean, vowels are pretty much fully interchangeable when you're studying mythology and language from a philological perspective, because just think about the difference between how somebody speaking English on one side of a country and speaking English on another side of a country might change the way their vowel sounds, right? Or I'll go to New Zealand instead of here. They like we'll say omega and they'll say omega, right? So it's the same word. They spell it the same way even. I think the same thing is going on with odd and add being a prefix that is close to like I think it's like adapi or yeah, adipati. That's a name for adipati is a name for Buddha. Yeah, and it means first father or God the Father.
Or the All
And
Father.
All Father, which is what Odin is called. I think the problem comes in where when we're doing this syncretism, uh, people do like to just throw shit against the wall and think, well, will this stick or whatever. I like and encourage the open-minded thinking, but what is most useful for me is to see, I think it's more useful to see the similarities in things than the differences, because there's always more sameness than difference. Apparently, it seems that way. And a big part of the division in the world has been like, my culture is superior to your culture or whatever. And I am not ruling out the value in the uniqueness of different cultures, but to me, it doesn't devalue the Odinist tradition to recognize it as also Buddhism. And of course, there's a lot of differences in the clothing between Buddhism and Odinism, but at the end of the day, we're still talking about the same idea, which is like the All Father, or the Father being the potter, and Pater is also the pattern. So a big part of where the issue comes in, and it's exactly it's most obvious to us in looking at modern Christianity and how Christianity has come along and where it came from, that the exoteric interpretation of Christianity is to lead people to this externalized savior messiah worship. I call it the messiah, right?
Yeah.
It's just, that your savior is out there external to you, and that you need the intermediating priest class, or even the mediator deity to get you to heaven or whatever. I mean, to me, the whole idea of be good and you'll go to heaven someday is exactly the same as the idea of eventually we'll have a communist utopia on earth. Just do what we say, be good, and we'll get there. It's unpopular opinion, but you've brought up Dylan a lot, and people ought to, if they're interested in what I'm talking about, definitely check out the Spirit World book series, and that's Spirit World, WHIRLED. I'm working on the 4th audiobook for that, narrating that, and I've done the 3rd one as well. You could actually start with the 3rd one if you wanted to, if you've already got a lot of Astro-Theology background, but if not, start with the 1st one, which is called The Definitions. And let's see, where was I going with this? Yeah, so people externalize the idea of the Messiah and miss the point of why all of these beings like Christ or Odin or Osiris, or I could name a bazillion of them, are depicted as black, which I think has to do with that this is the black sun or the hidden sun, meaning it's the internal light that is inside you and hidden, kind of like. So a big part of the syncretism of all the mythologies is the mythos of the seed. And that's where we get words like Cronus, because the KRN is the corn, and the corn is a seed. The seed goes underground and is hidden, and then the tree emerges from that, the world tree that the runes hang from, or that Odin hangs from to receive the runes, what have you. That sounds a lot like Logos, which is what they call the Christos. Christos is from Krishna. Krishna means black in Sanskrit. So I think that the esoteric meaning is about the seed of the divine spark within that you're meant to connect with, and that is the real salvation, or that's how you start to see the pattern, or the potter, the Father that is in all things, is that you have to see the pattern within yourself to recognize it in the external. Kind of like maybe like bring me back around to something interesting that you're thinking now or wanting to ask about now, because there's a lot of different directions I could go. And honestly, in just a 2-hour conversation off the top of my head, it is probably pretty difficult to convince anybody that the all the world religions and spiritual traditions come from a singular philosophy that is symbolized by the sun, although not meant to worship the sun as the god itself, but that again, the sun is a really good representation of the pattern or the fractal of it all. People get upset that they're like, oh, well, my tradition's way better than this other tradition, or not as corrupt as Christianity. But what is called Christianity is way, 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 way older than the name Christianity. It is
Christian Hermeticism is almost like
yeah, Hermeticism, exactly. Hermes is the same thing. It's the Hermes is the Logos or the Christos, and so is Thoth, and Thoth is the one who gave the Egyptians letters and writing, and Odin gave them the runes, and Jesus is the word. And you can even find this in like South American, ancient Mexican, and a lot of North American, Native American tribes as well, that the in the beginning was the word type idea.
Yeah, here, can I expand on this just a bit? So what I'm thinking is like Christianity, I feel like was set up from the start to be like an amalgamation of these religions. They kind of nicked from here and there because they were trying to make this one sort of world religion, I feel like. Whereas these other religions, they're based on source still, right? Like it's all coming from Astro-Theology, source, the all, and then it breaks up into the all father, all mother. But whereas like when they're naturally have differentiated themselves from the other groups, it kind of came about in a natural long process, I feel like. And then those differences are culturally significant to those groups more so than to like a group in China or in Norway or wherever, right? But whereas I feel like Christianity purposely put that stuff together to sort of muddy the waters in a way. So does that make sense how the differences are culturally significant, but it doesn't mean that we can't see the sameness of it all. You know what I mean? Is that making sense?
Yeah, yeah. They're gonna be differences based on regions and dialects of language. But
Different
when you
stories
have so
of
much, I don't remember the exact statistic Dylan gave, but like at the point where a language has more than 8 or 10 words in common, it's basically impossible that it doesn't come from a similar source, even if they have way more words different than the same. And what you're describing, early Christianity, the early church was like a poor attempt to syncretize various different regions and religions in a way that would be appealing maybe to the masses. How I see it is, look at the New Age movement. Okay, this is the perfect example of the same thing happening today. All of a sudden, there was an explosion of access to knowledge with the internet, and maybe like even before the internet, with the just more mass communication that became available. And this New Age movement arises where people sort of pick and choose from spiritual traditions wherever and be like, well, my goddess is Freya, or my I'm going to work with the god Odin now, or whatever. And they're just sort of like mix and match, picking different deities and concepts, and making a very literal belief in those beings. And a good example too is also how the old kingdom of Egypt and then the new kingdom. In the old kingdom of Egypt, there were many different Neteru who were gods, but they were meant to be they were understood as allegory of different aspects of nature and processes in nature. And then when the new kingdom arises, people start actually literalizing, or a better word would be fetishism, fetishizing the Neteru, believing them to be actual literal beings that had some power or control over their life. So you went from an internal understanding of these aspects of nature or Neteru to an externalization, and thus a hierarchy that puts humanity below something that is technically fiction. And I think that's a big point to recognize. All of this is like, it maybe recognize it in yourself, seeing the connection here between Old Kingdom Egypt and New Kingdom Egypt, pre-Christian church, post-Christian church, pre-New Age movement, post-New Age movement. All of these are a similar thing where things become fetishized, as in the best definition of fetishism would be when you take the symbols and words and concepts and tools and rites from ancestors and basically miss the point of them and begin to worship sort of the image as the thing rather than the spirit of the thing, or the intent of the thing, or the deeper meaning of whatever it is. And in the modern day, things have gone so far into fetishism that like fiction has become the master of most human beings on earth in a bunch of different ways. First of all, like, people are obsessed with fictional stories, and that's more important to them than what's going on in the real world. They could tell you all about whatever Netflix show they're into, and they have no idea how to grow a tomato or something, something that's real. You have the legal system that is entirely based on occultly, but not that hard to find out, on legal fictions, which is corporations, corporate names. In legal speak, fiction or artificial is also synonymous with dead. So we have these corporate names and corporate governments, corpse, to do the green language on the word corporation, it would be corpse orator, a dead speaker of the dead or death speaker. And people hold up their government issued identity, all capital letters name, as if that external fictional name is really them, when what we really are is a verb, not a noun. We're a continual process and a beingness, not a, like, people look at the word human being as being is some kind of a noun, like I am a being, but being is a verb. It's got an ing at the end, right? So there's a lot of directions we could go from there, but to me, it's very important to recognize fiction as fiction, and the value of fiction is in allegory and how it reflects and teaches you about the natural world. And if fiction is a barrier between you and the natural world because of your belief in fictional things over the real, then that is where there's a big trap happening.
Yes. So yeah, Jung has a way of talking about like fairy tales where it's like it's important because it keeps the shadow figure like alive in this story. So it's like you can work with these archetypes within these story frames that are important. So you did a good interview with Emily Moyer a couple days ago, and you talked about zeitgeist and all that stuff. So it's like I feel like the over fetishizing of something then makes it like, okay, now it's just all the sameness, and so then it becomes meaningless, right? And that's kind of like where I'm fighting against. It's like it's all this, sure, it all comes from the same source, so does everything, but there is like a particular meaning. It's like I just don't want to lose the meaning of these stories, which I feel like, oh, it's just the sun, so fuck it, we won't even look at it, kind of thing like that. Whereas that's not what you're doing. I'm just trying to like differentiate between, the importance of the difference. And they all do come from like, a lot of stuff comes from Egypt, Ireland, the Phoenicians. That's why Dylan's books are so great. I've just started cracking into them, but the conversations you guys have, the languages, yes, they're all coming from like a similar source language, Celtic, or I don't know what, Hebrew, Latin. They all have similar words that sort of stick together. But yeah, that's what I just don't want to lose the meaning through the over syncretizing. That was just my point I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I totally feel you there. And I think a lot of people instinctively feel that way too. And maybe that's why they push against syncretizing mythologies between different cultures. But the real point isn't that whenever we talk about all these different deities really being different masks that the one being is wearing, like the sun goes through 12 stations of the zodiac and becomes a different character in each sign. It doesn't take away other levels of meaning. All right. We're doing what we're doing is we're adding, or we're digging to a more core or root meaning. And it's just like you said, there's the source, the one, and then the archetypal layer that is like the first level of differentiation and separation of the source energy. And things get more and more complex and minute as you separate further and further out and go further from the source energy. But most people are on just like that outer ring of the knowledge. And it doesn't take away the specificity of cultural insights from the outer ring to move further in towards the inner ring. We're not saying it's this and not that. We're just saying, hey, it's also this. Hey, all these things are connected at the root, is the point.
Walter Russell has his own sort of cosmology. It's very similar to a lot of it, right? He's got the all, and then it breaks down into like the all mother, the all father. Shinto is very much like that, right? Shinto has like, yeah, it's like personifying like the weather and like all that type of stuff, where it takes on its own sort of emanation, but it's not like a god. You know what I mean? It's not like just like you were saying, like it's not in the statue. The god isn't in the statue or whatever that you're worshiping. I like that over fetishizing. That's a really good term. And the old kingdom and the new kingdom, that's when like the Hyksos came in and all that type of stuff was going on with the Atnis. And that was basically where like the fall of Egypt started, right? Was right on that new kingdom period.
Yeah, the Atonists. How close is Atonist or Aton to Adon, right? Like they called God or Jehovah Adonai, but also there's in the Hellenistic tradition, or if you're speaking Greek back then, you wouldn't even aspirate the H in Hellenistic. It would be Hellenistic. Well, who's El? We know about that too. They even called him El Shaddai. The same time they're calling him Adonai, the one, the being. El means the also. It's kind of just like the word theos, or from theological, referring to things talking about God. Well, it starts with the, which is the same meaning as El. And Adonai is very close to Adonis. Adonis is in the Hellenistic tradition a sun solar deity. And does Adonis sound, the add-on of Adonis sound that different than Odin? Is it really that different? It's not. And Adonis is born from a mother named Mira or Myrrha, like the frankincense and myrrh that they brought to the nativity scene for Christ.
Mara.
Myrrha is not that far off, or Mira is not that far off from Mary at all, and not that far off from Maya. Maya is the mother of Mercury or Hermes. Maya is also the name of the mother of Uda, exactly the same name. Go figure. And Adonis is interesting story, because when Adonis is born from Mira, who is like impregnated in a sort of immaculate conception way, her family gets upset that she was pregnant and shouldn't have been. And so they banish her and turn her into a myrrh tree. And from the myrrh tree, a seed falls off of it, which becomes Adonis. So Adonis is born from a seed. Well, that connects you immediately to Kronos, who, by the way, Kronos was also called Adamu or Adonis, like connects directly. Adonis and Cronus are also the same being. We talk, a big part of the confusion here is in the fact that before a certain point, the planets, the wandering luminaries, planets, small plane, planet, they were not referred to by the names of the current god deities that they have now. They had totally different names. And in fact, all of the beings that have a name as one of the wandering luminaries now, at one point, their name did represent a solar deity or the sun. And you have to go back further to find that, or just study the language and see that that's what it's talking about. But it's very interesting that Kronos, who's like the sun in winter more often than not, the winter sun, or the the high father of darkness, or the dark time of the year, which is the same as Abraham, Ab being father, and Ham or Abram being father, and Ham being darkness or blackness. Abraham,
the high dark father.
The dark father, yes, the Darth Vader.
Right.
Yeah, because Vader is father in German.
Yeah.
So when they call Darth Vader, they're calling him the Dark Father. And Luke Skywalker is Lux, which is light. Well, what is the light that walks the sky? Is the sun. I mean, this mythology has been played out over and over again, especially through Hollywood. You know for sure when you study this stuff that whoever is behind Hollywood knows this language and is speaking it to us all the time. And I think it's part of why stories resonate, is that on a internal level, we feel how that story connects to the truth of the all. or of what nature is doing. But maybe to like go back to finish the thread about Adonis, that is interesting is he was the seed, the corn, the KRN of Adonis was taken to the underworld by Aphrodite. Well, Aphrodite, hermaphrodite, Aphrodite was shown with a beard frequently. Aphrodite is also Hermes. They're just the same way as Zeus is said to be an eternal man, but also a maid, swinging both ways. Just like the sun in Leo is a male, but in Virgo is a female. So Aphrodite takes the seed Adonis to the underworld, where he's raised by Persephone. To me, that, and then he becomes the beautiful, attractive god, handsome young god Adonis when he rises up out of the underworld, which is the point of the spring equinox. Well, to me, that sounds very much like the mythology of Osiris, who had Nephthys and Isis, the two females at his side, who are also called in some translations Murray and Myrti, just like Mary and Martha that Jesus had. Again, like we just see that there's way more symbolism that is the same than is different. Like another example would be Bacchus. Bacchus is like there's tons of symbolism pertaining to how the like words for water and flow are syncretizable, if you will. They're philologically linked and connected to words that pertain to the sun and life. And Bacchus is a perfect example of that. Bach being river or stream in German. Well, Bacchus is symbolized with the monogram that is where we get the whole IHS that the Roman Catholics were putting on things to represent Jesus. IHS is kind of like a corruption or an alteration of the monogram of Bacchus, which was Upsilon Eta Sigma in the Greek characters, which would look interestingly if you were to go and pronounce the if you're going to go and pronounce the Upsilon Eta Sigma that symbolize Bacchus, you would actually get something akin to hues. So when people are saying that they're like that Christians are good men, well, good is God or Gad, and the Christus in Greek meant good or benevolent or benign as well. So in fact, like Christians comes from Christians, also there's a connection there. They're good. They're the good men or good fellas, which is what you call the mafia, which also comes out of Italy. And so we have, if you were a bondsman of the Christ or bondsman of Christ, you were Hughes man, because the Hughes is the Upsilon Eta Sigma, or what became the IHS for Jesus. And there's other fascinating things about that too, like that the sun is divided, if you will, into different hues throughout the day and at different characters throughout the year, and even throughout the morning, afternoon, and evening, the way similar to the way that the Egyptian sun god had one name at the beginning of the day and another name at noon and another name as it was falling. It was Horus Ra in the morning time, which is Horus the Younger, or Horopolo. Wait, that sounds like Horus Apollo.
Mm-hmm. I apologize.
Yeah, apologize. Yeah, there's a lot of apologetics for the this cult of the sun from.
So like, but other planets are personified too in stories, right? Like Ishtar and Tammuz is like the sun and Venus story. Same with like, like Persephone goes into Hades and then she has a baby, Zagreus. Zagreus becomes Bacchus, right? So it's like there is like other planetary stuff going on there as well, in your opinion, or what? Or is it all the sun?
I think it's all the sun, because the sun is doing the whole creator, destroyer, preserver role.
What about like the morning star and evening star? Like the sun, the evening star heralds up, and then the sun comes back up. There was that stories of like Ishtar and Tammuz, which is the sun and Venus. I thought.
Yeah, it all depends on like.
I guess it's still the sun.
What do we Well, again,
Splitting
what's
hairs here.
important is that back then, at an earlier point in history, I say back then, but if we wanted to, I could pull up some information of like maybe when the switches happened. But there was no Venus was not a name for the planet that we call Venus now.
Cool. Yes,
Now that being
I
said,
agree.
um, yeah, again, there's multiple levels and layers of allegory going on in the stories. And the point isn't to say that each of these characters is only the sun or only the one, but that we can find the solar connection or the astro-theology in all of the mythology that demonstrates that either A, it came from the same tradition and the same language system originally, or B, there's some actual inherent logos to the way that we communicate what we see in nature that somehow is innate within us and naturally arises from us and therefore creates a similarity between one system and another. But I find that unlikely because when we see the similarity in like rites and traditions and like weird rituals that cultures that seemingly have no contact with each other share, it makes you kind of
Seemingly.
shake your head and be like, who would just come up with that? Like it's said about um, sorcery and magical occult practices in like Peru, for example, that they share over half of their practices and beliefs in their magical systems with the European Western occult tradition. And the story that you're given is that, oh, well, when the Spaniards and the conquistadors came over, they influenced them a lot. And so they just took on a bunch of the occultism of Europe at that point. But what really happened when the Spaniards came over, the Catholic Empire under Queen Isabella, they actually wouldn't, while they were conquering and destroying everything and looting all the gold, they wouldn't even allow anybody with an education to come over to the so-called New World. And I'm sure it's because if anybody that had any level of education came over, they'd be like, oh, these people have a version of exactly what we have. And so our holy church is clearly not really original and clearly not the only we're not the only people that God spoke to or something like that. And it wouldn't go well for the empire to destroy their erroneous foundations of their own history and primacy. And like the Mexica people, interestingly enough, Mexica has Zaka in it, and Zaka is the name for Buddha.
Gautama Saka Muni.
There you
So here's
go.
one thing. Do you believe that people were more connected before, like traveling around the world? That's why there's Greek buildings all over the world, really, like in America and in Baalbek and in Greece. Or
I
do you
think
think
so. I think that there's reason to assume that for sure.
okay, so and then
Especially because so much of the similarities between the languages has to do with ideas of like mariners and sailors.
yeah,
Actually, Dylan's next book is going to be called The Holy Sailors,
I'm
which
super looking forward to that. I love that last interview you did. That was so good. So good, dude. Irish origins, you're tying all this stuff together and breaking it down. It's super cool, man. I love that stuff. That was amazing interview.
yeah, Dylan brings it.
Yeah, you're doing you guys just together, man. You just that was like the best interview I've seen him in. That was so good.
Cool.
So here,
Yeah,
can I say something about Buddha? So have you
sure.
checked out the Unslaved episodes with Jason Giorgiani when he talks about Mithraism is Freemasonry, but then he also talks about Lao Tan, who is Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, got stopped with the Greeks going over, and then they changed his name to Gotan. Then it became Gautama Buddha. That Lao Tzu is actually
Oh,
Gautama
they got the
Buddha. Did
goat
you
in
hear
there
about that?
too.
Or
I haven't caught that.
got to check it out.
I'm behind on Unslaved. I really
It,
should catch up.
it's an old one. It's like maybe last year or 2 years ago.
I'm
I don't
maybe
know.
like really behind, but I love Michael's work. I love
Okay,
Unslaved. I
so
just need to catch up.
Giorgiani really goes into this and talks about the etymology
Yeah,
of
I think I
those
need to talk to
names, and
Giorgiani.
you should, man. He's
Giorgiani, you
fucking
see that? Jason.
yeah. Jason Giorgiani is
I've
cool.
definitely heard him talk before about some of the Iranian stuff. Really
Yeah,
amazing. But like just to throw a point in about the Buddha that I missed, there's so many connections and I'm just
yeah. No, I'm
flying
trying
by the seat of my pants here.
to.
Talking about Adonis being born from a myrrh tree or a mira tree. Well, Mira, Mary, Maya, Maya, the mother of Buddha. Well, what is Buddha? Buddha, a bud? A bud comes off of a tree, right?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, there's that. So, I mean, I feel like that the whole mythos of the seed is a good thing to study to find connections between everything, everywhere, all at once, for sure.
Cool, cool. So
But the whole Chinese connection in the Far East is needing a lot more research to demonstrate similarities there. It does seem like the systems are more Eastern in their origin overall, which kind of makes sense because the sun rises in the East. I don't know.
yeah, check out the Giorgiani episode. I can't remember which one. If I find it, he kind of mentions it partway through. It might be the Mithras one where he goes through the rites of Mithras and how they're basically the same as Freemasonry. But what I want to talk now, so Euheremism and Pesher, they're like two similar sort of ways where it's like they take a historical figure, then they add either a figure from ancient past and try and sort of like conflate the two, also adding Astro-Theology on top. So like my example of this is like Julius Caesar and Abraham Lincoln. Like what's going on here? Did Sir Francis Bacon make up Caesar and then they just applied that story onto Lincoln? Like what is your opinion on that? Because it's like they do this all throughout history, and that's the most recent one I can kind of find where it's like they have these similar stories. It's like what's going on here?
Never really thought about that before, how the Lincoln story mirrors the Caesar story.
It's crazy.
But it does. And, I haven't done a ton of looking into Lincoln, but there are some really big red flags, like that he was born in a log cabin or whatever. And you look into the story of the Lincoln log cabin and
Right.
find out that that was basically made up and that somebody built a log cabin and started taking it around to like carnivals and county fairs and be like, they take it apart and rebuild it and be like, this is the exact cabin that Lincoln was born in.
Right.
And anyway, like all this marketing kind of reminds me of the World's Fairs injection of a particular view of history. And you just have to wonder, I don't know. Lincoln is not that far back in our history, but that doesn't preclude it from being made up, because look at what happens today. I haven't really explored it that much, but it seems like this just happened with the actress Anne Heche, where
Hmm.
she was doing something, speaking out against something, maybe like human trafficking or something, is what I heard. And then they're like, oh, she went crazy and drove her car into somebody's house. And
Not
you
funny.
watch the
Sorry.
people on Spiders were showing this video of her being taken out in a body bag, but then she like rips out of the body bag and you see her try to get out and they like shove her back in. And then she dies in a coma at the hospital. So to me, like, that could have been a remote controlled car, a Michael Hastings style, and then medically murder somebody and say it was from something else. And then, now we have go far enough down the line, and not that she's a very important character, but now there's going to be a story of how she died and why she died that might be completely different from what really happened. And this is in the age where people can record things in HD and everyone's got that in their hand.
Right.
They can still pull off an op like that. So going to the time of Abraham Lincoln, what we actually get is true, but as the true historical gospel about that could be totally off. And the further back in time you go, the more likely that's the case. So I tend to agree with Dylan that anything in terms of writing can be forged and faked. And most of the history of the church is definitely that. A lot of big figures, bishops, and writers in the clergy themselves have admitted that their forefathers and precursors were just rife forgers. So, yeah, I don't really trust anything about history.
Right.
And I can't tell that because I can't separate what is history from what is astro-theology and mythology applied onto someone, which is what a euheremism is. Like, especially in the names of people. I'm thinking for right now, I'm thinking about Alexander the Great. Al is L, X is 10, and X is a symbol for the sun. Um, Alex, Ander. Anyway, An is like on, is another word for the sun. There's ah all of that seems very suspect. He's even supposedly like a descendant of Hercules, who is another solar character. So the work Dylan has done on Crow 777 episodes about the Roman history, and that the 12 Roman emperors could just be zodiacal symbolism, to me that totally fits. I think what we're looking at is very probably, very likely, a much more recent power takeover by the Vatican, like way more recent than we believe. And at the point of maybe some big genocides and big book burnings, you can just insert whatever history you want to the illiterate masses, and it won't take very many generations before people forget that there was even a big change in an insertion, or they'd ever knew to begin with, because they're just normal folk living their lives, and the controller class is playing a longer game. So I don't know, man. I don't know.
Don't know. Yeah, because Ralph Ellis goes into it a bit. He calls it like Pesher in the Bible, where like they conflate two characters together, so you don't really know what's happening. But yeah, who knows? It's kind of like the same thing. Yeah, that you and like I think it goes back to almost like John Dee, just like what you and Juan on from the One-on-One podcast talk about. It goes back to like John Dee and Francis Bacon, and then they set up this new world, and then they can rewrite the whole story from there. Like after a few traumas later, we don't really remember what's going on. Everyone's grandparents and great grandparents have been whacked out, and then yeah, I think it kind of goes back to like that 16, right around uh the Renaissance era, right? In the Enlightenment era. I feel like that's when there was like some switch happening, but we can't even go back that far, really.
Right. So that makes the most valuable things to research real world artifacts, real world masonry uh, that is still around, or old artwork is very useful for that, to try to get a line on what at least the symbolism is talking about. And language language can't lie. At least when you see similarities between languages. And yeah, to me that is a really helpful, like, one another one that's coming to mind, just to connect the Odinism to the Hellenistic world very clearly and obviously, would be Hela in Odinism is the goddess of the underworld, right? And Hera is a goddess in the Hellenistic tradition. Well, Hellenistic, there's that,
Right.
but the underworld being Tartarus, so there's your Tartaria as well. But yeah, the RL switch, there's a couple of very common switches, but that from language to language, that are really, really worth playing with as often as you can. And a big one is the L to R or R to L. Any words of or names of mythological characters, if you just start playing with that switch, you'll start seeing things that jump out at you all over the place, like Hela to Hera, or I don't know, man. Nothing's popping into my head right now, but there's a bazillion examples.
Yeah, it's a big subject. I'm just trying to pick your brain here while I got you here on these few things. So thank you for that. I apologize to people watching who don't know what the hell we're talking about, but get into it. Yeah, Ralph does a really good job with like the whole biblical stuff and bringing it into actual history. Like it's like, again, they did the same thing with Jesus, where it's like there was this Jesus of Gamala whose whole royal family wore thorned crowns, and they lived like over in Babylon somewhere. And so it's like they've kind of conflated that with this new savior they've created. But he's digging up these coins, he's finding these zodiacs out in the woods or out in the desert, I guess. And I don't know, Ralph's pretty cool too, doing that stuff.
Yeah, I haven't looked into Ralph's work enough to be able to speak on it, and so I'm not disparaging his work at all, or saying that his theory is wrong or incorrect. But in terms of the coinage has always very commonly anyway depicted the solar deity in some form or another. And the crown of thorns is like the rays of the sun, and it's a similar symbolic motif to the ram's horns, which Alexander was shown wearing. The ram's horns are, they go back to Amun in the Egyptian tradition, Ra Amun or Amun Ra, which they say at the end of their Christian prayers. Amen.
Well, I just did a thing on the movie Dune and Mithraism. Basically, Dune is Freemasonry in space, if anyone didn't know.
Oh, for sure it is.
But like, yeah, they have Mithras, and he's got those rays coming out of his helmet. It looks just like the Statue of Liberty. It's hilarious, right? Like,
yep, just... Statue of Liberty, SOL. There's your soul, Sol right. Invictus.
Nice one. Yeah, cool. So maybe switch gears here. I would like to talk a little bit about your sound healing and your oracle work that you do for people, because that is super cool as well. I'm really into that.
Yeah. So do you want me to just kind of like overview that, or do you have any specific questions you want to start with?
Maybe just give a bit of an overview of like what it is. Like, I say sound healing, but it's kind of more like frequency, vibrational tune up work with aura fields and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, it's like aura. I'm like an aura technician over here. And it's something that I think anybody could actually learn. So I taught myself this method of tuning. Sound healing is not a bad phrase for it, but it also invokes all kinds of ideas, like laying in a yoga studio while somebody's playing crystal bowls around you, or right. gongs, or binaural beats, or all kinds of things might fit into the category of sound healing. And tuning, as I do it, is a form of using sound for healing, but it's more like you're bringing balance to the person's energy field and attention to stagnant issues of flow or beliefs that are stagnating about themselves. And, you know, I've talked about this at length, and in some presentations gone for as long as 3 hours just talking about the process. So there's a lot to it, but in a nutshell, and I learned this from, again, Eileen Day McKusick. Let me show off her book here. I got so many books over here that are worth people's time, but Tuning the Human Biofield, Eileen Day McKusick. I read this book and was able to teach myself the method that we're talking about right now just from that. Or you can learn, I say just from that. There was a lot of experimentation. I even once received a tuning from somebody who was certified by her coursework, and I learned a few things from that experience, but ultimately it isn't complicated. When we apply coherent sound in the energy field of our body, which is about a 6-foot bubble space off of all directions, it allows the body to self-tune and self-correct anything that is a dissonant vibration that the body's putting off. That sounds very woo, but it's also completely scientific and consistent. Her other book, Electric Body, Electric Health, this is a really good read if you just want to know more about how your body's electrical aspects function, and tons of science. Like, she does not shy away from actual credentialed scientific research on the topic. It's not all woo. She's sort of very Libran, bridging the spirit and the science together. Also, while I was grabbing books, I just want to show people Spirit World books. Get these books if you want to catch up on.
Oh, bro.
There you go. The Definitions, book 1. Book 1 is a really good intro to Astro-Theology, but it gets so much better as he continues writing.
Yeah, cool.
Book 4 is just off the chain. How good it is.
I'm really looking forward to that book, but they've been sitting on my shelf for a while. I just bought them to support Dylan, and I was like, I better start cracking into these books now that he's writing new ones. You get so far behind, right? You want to.
Yeah, but they're page turners, dude.
Yeah,
I recommend people read the physical book and the audiobook, because seeing the phonetics is one thing, but then hearing it pronounced is another thing, and put a lot of effort into pronouncing things correctly.
Right. Well, and it really grinds it into your mind too. You read it, then you can listen to it. And Dylan had a good idea of actually even having the Kindle book, so you can be searching through it nice and easy, right? And then having all of those.
Yeah, because he knows I do that.
Yeah, you
practically
have
every
to.
podcast I'm on.
Yeah.
I've got a Spirit World book open or another book that I can cross-reference certain words and ideas because there's so much information. To remember all the connections, it takes practice, and sometimes there's just going to be more than what you can remember off the top of your head. But yeah, let me continue on the tuning thing. So,
Can I ask you a quick question?
oh, sure.
Just first is like, so both books by Eileen is what you would recommend, or just start with the first one and then?
If you're just kind of interested in informational sense, then I would get the newer one, Electric Body,
Right.
Electric Health. And if you really want to dive into the practice and do it yourself, the first book has actually got a little bit more information on the method in a functional way.
Cool.
Yeah.
I have both those books too. It's just like I got to get around to reading them.
Yeah. And the audiobooks of those are great. She narrates them herself and she's a great narrator. So that's fun. Yeah. So, in a nutshell, that method is like the biofield anatomy is what really is innovative about what Eileen came up with. And the biofield anatomy is the theory that certain energy in the form of feelings and memories, and thus equated to sort of like traumatic experiences, actually can, what we'll do is we'll compartmentalize and wall it off from our conscious self because we don't want to feel it. There's actually, in my understanding of how the psyche works, kind of similar to how the Egyptians had multiple layers of the body, I work with a multi-layered psyche myself. And one of the layers of the psyche is actually a protective layer that's whole job is to hold back feelings and memories from you and awareness from you of things that it thinks that you will be interrupted from what it is that you have said you wanted to do or need to do, or survival things in your daily life. So, it's like, yeah, we don't have time to cry over this shit right now. We need to like go to work today. So, this energy can be held away from ourselves. And basically, you got to understand that memory is not in the brain. It is the flow of energy in our field that constitutes memory. And so the more cohesive and coherent and unblocked your flow is, the more you remember about everything from childhood memories to why you incarnated on the realm to begin with and what your purpose is, all of that, who you truly are. So with the biofield anatomy, she's provided like a chart, if you will, that tells you what types of feelings and what type of experiences are in what parts of the energy field around the body if they were to get stuck. So if you were to find stuck energy in a certain place, you would actually be able to reference this biofield anatomy and know a general sense of what that is. And it's not exact. There's some intuition. And maybe if you know more about the person you're working on, you might have even better intuition. For me, there's a lot to possibly unpack about this, but how the method works, and it's so consistent, is I'm going to sweep from one end of your energy field towards your middle, towards your column, central column or spine, the main chakra vortexes. And if I find stuck energy, then I am sort of clicking and dragging it back to the middle so that it can return to circulation for the rest of the body. So we're working on this 3 axes of top to bottom, left to right, and forward and backwards to determine what stuck energy might feel like. And let me just give like a recent example of how this might play out. So I had a client this week who I noticed that one side of his energy field was like dramatically longer than the other side, like about 6 to 8 inches on the right was longer, and it was shortened on the left side. So it was as if, in the middle of the toroidal field, donut vortex shape that your energy field is, it was as if his body was misaligned and like off to the side, and it wasn't in the middle of his own field. Like he was leaning to the right. And when I explained this, that I was finding that these boundaries were stretched out, he was like, wow, well, one of my legs is longer than the other one, according to my chiropractor. So we got in further to like some early life experiences that informed some of the beliefs he had about himself that he wasn't maybe aware were beliefs that were causing him to lean more on the right side being the masculine side, and sort of thus weakening the receptive side of himself, or the feminine yin side. And it was amazing that 3 days after his tuning with me, he went to his chiropractor, who told him that his legs were nearly the same length now. So the reason why the legs were different lengths was because one hip was out of alignment, like pretty badly, and it was the right hip. Again, being the masculine side, the right hip has to do with like pushing yourself too hard and overdoing it consistently if you have hip problems. And people do kind of work themselves to death like slaves in our society a lot of the time, and they'll thus get right hip replacements before they're that old in Western culture. Or if you're like really lazy and really averse to doing any work at all, you might get left hip issues. So there's information encoded in the entire biofield across every one of these up, down, left, right, forward, backwards axes. And with the forks, so different people maybe have different ways of finding the stuck energy, but for me, it's really obvious. My body communicates it to me really, really easily. And I do this remotely. So this also proves that everything in existence is mental and conceptual, including distance and separation. I do it all remotely, and it is still fully effective, and in some ways more effective remotely. But so I'll hit the tuning fork and I'll sweep it, and say I'm looking for the outer edge of the field. When I hit the spot where the outer edge is, my ears pop. Every time, guaranteed, 100% consistent. Whenever I hit a spot that I'm looking for, my ears pop. Now, sometimes there'll be an accompanying thought or intuition about what something means, or a feeling that goes with it, and that gives it more context. But at the very least, I'm just looking for the places where I hit a spot with the fork where it makes my ears and head pop with like this electrical crackly feeling. And that's just me. That's not really described in her books in terms of the method.
Right.
I think different people have different aptitudes in terms of their ability to communicate with their body, which is what psychic abilities are, is communicating with your body, because your body is connected to the all and is comprised of the all, the universe inside you, so to speak. So your body knows everything already that there is to be known. It is a matter of like, can we come up with a system of communication to talk to the body, to find out what it knows? And I believe that that is what is so useful about the tuning protocol, is that it is a language with the biofield anatomy in particular, and the methodology of using the forks. It becomes like a communication system to tap into the innate intelligence of the body for yourself and for the other, whoever you're working with or working on.
Okay, so you're saying that with the tuning, you can actually heal physical wounds. Is that correct?
In terms of like, you get a gash on your
Yeah.
arm
Okay.
and you hold the fork over it, I can't say that it's gonna like Wolverine heal right in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
Now, physical wounds, immediate physical trauma, like a gash and hole in your arm, that is actually a hole in your energy field. Your body is a layer of your energy field. I have experience of having wounds of my own that were worked on with forks, like open, like I scraped up my leg one time, and my girl held the forks right over it, and we could hear a pitch change from being away from the wound and holding it over the wound.
Right.
So I do think that there's a high probability of accelerating the healing process, and definitely know that it is good for alleviating pain and inflammation. Like I've had clients specifically tell me many times that they were having painful inflammation in various parts of their body, and then after a session, the inflammation went down really dramatically. So it's subtle. So the forks and the sound aren't healing you themselves; they are showing your body what coherence sounds like, and your body is self-tuning and adjusting itself. So the body builds itself in a literal sense, but also in the posture that it holds, like tension that it holds or releases. All of that is based on the energy field as a blueprint. And the energy field is primarily based on the structure of your thoughts and beliefs and awareness. So it's like layers of an onion, going back to that idea of the source, and then archetypes, and then further differentiation from there, all the way down to the minute in the details and what you consider like the cellular. It's the same thing. And the I think the sounds are very much like showing the body something very close to the pure undifferentiated source energy. Like, you know, the 528 fork might be one of those archetypes, primary archetypes, right adjacent to source energy in the form of sound, the way that
Right.
the seven colors would be.
So say for example, the guy with the hip issue, it's like because of all that stuck energy, you start working with that, and then it's actually freeing up and allowing it to heal more than it's actually like actually healing it, right? Is that the theory behind it, kind of?
Yeah. Yeah. The
Yeah, okay,
body
that makes
does the
sense.
healing.
I've got to get one of
But
these tune-ups, man. I swear.
yeah, do it, man. I
Got
love
it.
that. It's always really fun to talk to somebody who has a show who has actually received the tuning too, because then they can share their experiences. But kind of like think about how one of the ways that it can help is similar to deep tissue work in a massage. So whenever we're holding tension in a certain area of our body, it requires energy to hold that posture of tension. And
Mm-hmm.
when it becomes unconscious, we don't even realize we're doing it. It's just our natural posture, or has become our natural posture, but it's an unnatural tension. It is also actually holding up a certain quantity of mental energy, kind of like when you have too many things running on your computer in the background at once that you're not even using or you forgot were open. Holding a certain posture of tension is mental energy that is stuck on the program of hold this posture. And this is maybe a defensive posture or a subordinate posture, or who knows, there could be all kinds of reasons. So that mental energy is also on one level a belief that requires that posture because the belief says so. And
Yeah.
they're usually very unconscious. So like a client I had also this week as an example, didn't realize it, but there was a lot of stuck energy in like the right knee and right ankle region. And particularly that pertains to like um obstacles, both self-created and external, depending on if you're talking knee or ankle, and challenges overcoming obstacles of different sorts, like moving forward. The right foot is the one you put forward first, is kind of the future oriented side. And after we did the tuning, uh his right knee and right ankle, he reported back, were very very sore. And it might not sound like what you want, like, oh, I don't want to be in pain after I get a healing, but it wasn't because of the tuning. It was because of the release of the tension. Just like if you get a massage and they work on some muscles and you release some big knots, the area where that was is going to be sore. Because think about how you're sore after you work a certain muscle group in the gym really heavily. While holding tension in one spot 24/7 and never letting it go, that is like exercising those muscles. And when you let it go, it finally has a chance to heal and relax and restore itself back to balance. And it's going to feel sore because it just did a lot of work. And healing, sometimes pain is actually an indicator of healing. And ultimately, pain is a request from your body to pay attention to a certain part of itself. The pain is a signal of communication. And instead of rejecting and pushing pain aside and pushing it down and trying to avoid pain, like culture kind of teaches, or mask or numb out pain, you really want to put your attention right into the pain. And that's going to reduce the immediacy of the need for the signal in the first place, because where attention is directed, energy flows, and energy is what brings healing power to that spot.
Yeah, it's very similar to like qigong and that type of stuff. Yeah, and like having, like, say you were injured in a car accident or something that was traumatic, there's going to be emotions tied into that actual physical wound too, which is going to like keep that tension there as well. Yeah, that's super cool. Because I've like hurt my shoulder, and then because I'm leaning one way, I've hurt my hip a bit, and I hurt my groin doing something else. And it's like all that imbalance just creates more and more imbalance, right? And yeah, this tuning fork thing seems a real good way to get rid of that.
Yes. Is it the right shoulder?
Yeah. I was in a car accident,
So,
my arm ripped right around.
ooh, So the
Pretty
right
brutal.
shoulder, one of the things that can mean is um kind of saying yes to things that you really ought to say no to, carrying other people's burdens for them, doing the work for other people that is really theirs to do. It's a boundaries issue in a lot of ways. And think of it like a lot of the understanding of the biofield is interesting because we speak that way in metaphor all the time. Like I'm shouldering your burden for you
Right.
or whatever. Well, the right shoulder does that. The left shoulder is more like a more emotional burdens and pains, and you can hold on to other or absorb other people's sort of grief or sadness or pain more on the left shoulder, left armpit side, but the right side is more like you're physically doing some shit for somebody else that is, and then the hip is like overdoing it physically. So you can easily
Mm-hmm.
run into if you're doing work that's not really yours to do, or you don't feel like you should be saying yes to that ultimately, or it's not what is best and right for you, you can get the right shoulder and the right hip can kind of get out of whack.
Yeah, it's gotten so much better over the last like 5 or 6 years from like doing that. Also, like working it out. I used to only be able to lift it like so high, but you hurt one shoulder and then your other shoulder is not as strong because you're not doing that stuff like that, right? And then it just
That's what
goes
got
on
me
and
into
on.
the forks was shoulder stuff. I hurt my shoulder doing rock climbing, but the injury pertained to everything that I just described about the right shoulder and the left
Right.
shoulder.
See, that's so
But
interesting.
the
Hey, how it
experience came
tied
to me
in.
in the world in the form of rock climbing that
Hmm.
brought my attention to it. And it's important to know about injury and disease that all injury and all disease is originates in a spiritual component, originates in a belief and an emotion, and how those things tie together. Like when you stub your toe, you didn't just stub your toe and that's just a random accident. Pay attention to which toe you stubbed. And do you know what meridian that connects to? Do you know what kinesiology points or reflexology points that toe connects to? It might be telling you something about your inner emotional state that you're not aware of or paying attention to. And so the external experience of the ouchie is like a universe waving a flag at you, like, hey, look at me. Hey, look at
Okay.
this. And
So it's like, yeah, so like I injured my shoulder, took so long to heal, whereas other people could have the same injury and heal way faster because there's not all of that psychological and energetic stuff tied into it as well, right?
could be, yeah. If they are willing to get to the core issue that led them to the shoulder injury, whether or not they realize that it's related to the shoulder injury would help it heal faster. Um, odd, interesting too is like when I got into sound because of shoulder injury myself, and it was from climbing, and it wasn't healing, and I was taking a lot of time off of climbing, and then trying to get back into it, but I still couldn't raise my arm high enough, and I got one of those weighted tuning forks that Eileen sells that you showed, the sonic slider. I started using it on myself, and within within days, the pain and the injury in the shoulder was healed. But this isn't to like scare people off from healing, but after I got the injury rectified using the sonic slider and healing that, what ended up happening, it wasn't right away, but it started my life started changing and situations in my life started changing and shifting that within by the end of the year, uh what it was that I was out of alignment with in my life and in my relationship, well, it started to see its way out the door. So, interesting thing about working with sound is that I feel like we have the whole trinity of mind, body, spirit, so that if we get stuck in one area, we can work on the other area and it will help in the area that we were stuck. So, for me, I was stuck in attachment to a relationship that was holding me back and hurting me in a lot of ways. And I wasn't seeing it. I was not allowing myself to see it, but it was actually the origin and or at least the external reflection of where the shoulder injury was coming from or what the shoulder injury was trying to show me. And so whenever I applied sound and healed the injury on the physical side with the shoulder, well, the external situation in the form of the relationship started to see itself out the door, like I said. And then that was hard. And that required me to face all of the various issues I was not facing that were leading me into the attachment to begin with. And so, just be aware that when you start getting serious about healing in a holistic and coherent way with something like sound, that
Oh, you froze up a bit, buddy. No worries. Hopefully you zap back in. Yeah, another question I have actually is just like what
you don't get to
force?
just pick and choose
Oh,
what you heal. Like you're going to, if you want, oh, you're kind of frozen there. There we go.
sorry, I was talking while you were frozen, but yeah, continue. Sorry.
Well, I'm just saying, yeah, like you're going to, if you really get serious about healing, you're going to have to accept that the changes are not going to just be biological, that you're going to also have to bear witness to the changes in your lifestyle and in your relationships and whatever that are the reflection of whatever was dissonant in your body or your health that you're working on. And if you're willing to do that, you're willing to allow that, then healing can occur. But disease will continue if we stay attached to that which is hurting us on any of those levels of mind, body, spirit. And 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 like getting into that level of healing and coherence also, after starting to begin my journey with working with sound, also is when on the spiritual side, all the various like hexes and erroneous beliefs that I was holding about things mystical related also began to dissolve and melt away. I mean, I never really made this connection, but that was about the time that I started to find the work of people like Dylan and start to learn the code and apply it myself, so that I couldn't be fooled anymore or not as easily. And that's a continuing journey because there's so much to untangle. But yeah, it applies on, you heal in one level and it's going to apply on all the levels. So, be ready for that. But yeah, it's very worth it.
So how long ago was this, if you don't mind me asking? This whole change of your partnership and all that type of stuff.
Not all that long ago. The, the healing process that I'm talking about, I believe, began at the end of 2019. It's when I started physically healing the shoulder injury, and then 2020 hit, and in 2020 is when also the relationship stuff that I was talking about began to untangle itself to the point of full separation and independence.
Right. I feel like I
And
saw
also
like a
that was,
physical change of you like from that point. Like I feel like you've changed quite a bit, just like even in the way you look in a way. Yeah, okay, cool. Psychic
hold up this
vampires, you
book
gotta
again.
watch out, man.
And I'm
Interesting.
still, well, it's a continual process because this is not to blame the other person, but whenever you're involved in something that is like energetically draining you, your systems do need time to repair themselves and get back to healthy expression. Like Tessarion says it all the time, that bad psychic vampirism in a chronic experience can take potentially years to fix yourself, if you will. And the beautiful thing, though, about the process of what they call healing, that sounds like something else I know. Helios?
Heal.
Heal?
Mm.
Helios? Where's your heel? Your heel's on the sole of your foot. Soul is what? Soul, Helios, what? Yeah, we're the sun. We're talking about the sun, but
Yeah. We're back here again. Oh no.
everything is everything. But yeah, the beautiful thing about the healing journey and the healing process is because we are vessels that are container is just a metaphorical word, because the energy, the source energy, the 0 point field, what people call ether, although ether have some, I'm realizing I have a lot of issues with the way it's described and the way that term is applied. But regardless, because we are a universal energy and an fractalized miniature of the all, that means that there's actually never an end to what we can heal within ourselves. And even when we've got ourselves in a really amazing balance of coherence on all metrics. There's always more that we can do for our heart, because we're at that point really influencing, especially if we've gotten really clear in our body vessel, we're really healing and influencing the all. We're detoxing the universe the more that we do it for ourselves. So don't look at it as discouraging that there's always a next thing and always a next level and always more work to do on yourself. Look at it like the more work you do on yourself, the better the world around you is going to get, the healthier the world around you is going to get, your own direct environment is going to get. So that old saying, I think it's Krishnamurti, I wanted to change the world, but really I needed to change myself. It really does work that way. At least your personal world will definitely alter.
Yes, I agree. And that's where, like, everyone's out trying to change everyone else, trying to change this. Like, just change yourself, and that's just going to like change the effects of those around you, and then they're going to maybe start using that as an example, or even feeling that energy, and they're going to start to change too. That's so interesting. Yeah, like so if you could choose two forks, what frequencies would those be? Because I've been trying to, like, I have the sonic slider, but I want more of like a sound vibration tuning thing. Your two favorite forks, go.
I
Other than your
guess it
giant one.
depends. Okay. My answer depends. I'm going to give,
Okay.
if I was going to give somebody just one fork to pick, I would say something like a 174 or even maybe a 144, although I haven't really worked with 144s much. A 174, I'll play it.
Oof,
Pretty low on the
pretty
frequency
low,
range.
yeah.
I find, okay, so in terms of like biofield tuning and wanting to be able to hear pitch changes and differences in the fork, if you were attempting this work on yourself or somebody else, the 174 is really good. And if I wanted to, I could do a whole session with just this fork. I like to use different forks and intentionally attach each of the frequencies to representing a different area of the body. I like to do that. It's sort of like a craft thing for me. I feel like it's sort of similar to magical correspondence systems, that the more matches that you can create in your ceremony to whatever your intention is, the stronger it gets, because you're actually taking an action to represent the thought and the intention. So that being said, I'm all about using like the full range of solfeggio in a session, but technically all the body is asking for is coherent sound, and coherent sound is sound that has a balanced wavelength of up and down on the sine wave. And 174 and the lower range frequencies like this below 200 are, they're really easy to get a good strike on because the tines are long and they ring out for a really long time because they're a bit larger. There's that too. And you can, because it's easier to get them sort of going louder and longer, it's easier to hear pitch changes and frequency shifts in them. And I like it for that reason. So like that's a practical answer. I'm pretty sure Eileen would probably agree with what I just said. Now, if you were going to get two forks that really sound good together, I love the 417 and the 528. Those in particular, they are still pretty good for what I was just saying. In the range of solfeggio, the only one that I don't find very easy to work with is the 285 for whatever reason. Or is it 258? Yeah, it's 285, right? Yeah. I use it so rarely that I was forgetting what it is. But I use 417 for sacral and 528 for solar. But again, you could use any frequency for any area of the body. Once you make the intention of like, now I'm working on the throat chakra, the decision is part of what makes whatever happen, because this process is so close to the purely mental plane or whatever, maybe it's logos or whatever. But the biofield tuning store has a really good 528 and 417 fork. They sound awesome. If anyone wants to pick those up, weighted tuning forks are the way to go if you want to work on your own body, on your own self, or on an injury, like the sonic slider that Eileen sells that Luke has got here. But I'll play the 417 and the 528 together because I really like how they sound together. And there's like a whole nother conversation we could have about solfeggio. What is solfeggio? What makes solfeggio? Why am I interested in those frequencies particularly? There's a whole like mathematical rabbit hole, mathematical rabbit hole to get into with those.
Yeah, cool. I don't want to keep you too much longer. I also want to talk about the whole dark night of the soul and all that type of stuff with people too. But I think this has been a pretty good first interview to go into who and what is chance all about.
Yeah,
So
this has been awesome.
yeah, this
Had a
was
lot of
fun.
fun. Time's really flown by.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on here. This has been great. Do you want to just leave your stuff before? I'll put all the links in the description and stuff like that, but you can find it on innerversepodcast.com. Is that where
That
you
is
find
accurate.
this?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
My YouTube is pretty popping in terms of if you show up while I'm premiering a video or doing a live, you'll have a lot of fun people to talk to. My Telegram chat is, like Luke said, it's like the best community ever. People are so cool there. Tons of geniuses who you can, I liken it to having a search engine that instead of being the Google AI censorship algorithm machine, you're asking human beings a question and they're answering based on their own experience and knowledge. I love that. So our Telegram chat, if you want to connect to the larger community, get in there. If you like what I do, you'll love the people that congregate around it. Yeah, InnerVersePodcast.com, links to everything I do. My Rockfin channel, if you want to get the premium content, is great, or my Patreon is great. And the only thing that I even ask for money for is the second hour of InnerVerse interviews. And everything else is free, including like 2 to 3 hour long live streams every Wednesday. And whenever we get the chance to do Marvel Demystifier shows where we de-occult Marvel movies and TV shows, those are also free and those are huge. That's a whole nother side of the work is deciphering the fictions. To what I like about reverse engineering, the social engineering, is that if the inverters of truth are inverting truth, then all you got to do is re-invert it.
Yeah.
And you can find truth in even the spells and sorcery.
Well, you see how much
Just
the
can only
runes are
work on.
co-opted too, right? All the symbols, like you get you get all that stuff, and you just look at what the person who's wearing it means by it, and you take the opposite, and you can literally look in a book, and it'll be like, oh, it'll give you the description of it. And you're like, yeah, that's exact opposite of what these people are using it for.
They do. It's like opposite day.
Yeah,
Everything
opposite
they
day.
taught you in school, just pretend you were playing opposite day and you'll go far. I remember when I had that realization when I started like waking up to conspiracy, so-called, I was like, oh, we're just playing opposite day. So when I got to the point where I started looking at the contradictions in the cosmology of the realm and was like, well, can I for myself find a curvature if I look for a curvature on the planet? It wasn't that at that point I was like, this is a big one, but everything else has been opposite days, so maybe this is also opposite day. And then I couldn't find a curvature whenever I went to a high place and looked for a far off landmark and could see it way too far away. I was like, okay, we're done here. Goodbye. Goodbye, ball.
Sextants.
So,
what's up with that? Anyway,
what's that?
Sextants. What's up with that?
Yeah,
Sextant.
exactly. Doesn't that require trigonometry?
That's a whole nother,
Doesn't trigonometry require triangles? Don't triangles have flat sides? Game over. Yeah. So anyway, that tangent aside, people can connect with me at my email if they want to schedule a session. I didn't even talk about cards, but I do read I Ching and tarot for people. I do spreads that are going to help you see what particular superpowers or levels of consciousness you're currently working on or unlocking, and then give you some information from different parts of yourself, like in message from your body, message from your heart, message from your mind, message from your higher self, the state of you on the yin and the yang side. Like we'll cover all these bases and give you context for how to unlock that key of destiny to unlock whatever it is you're moving towards and currently moving into. So very, very helpful sessions with the cards to resonate with your own internal knowing about who you are and why you chose to come here. And those pair very nicely with a tuning session to do that after a tuning. So
Cool.
that's a good move. People can email me or look at my website for more information about any of the things that I do.
Awesome. I was wondering if you paired those up together, like either before or after. Like my friend Martin, who's a longtime astrologer, he does dream analysis and he'll do the chart and then he'll do dream analysis after. And basically, the dream analysis is the same as the chart reading. Like it's the same stuff that's happening. It's so cool. I love mixing
That
that
definitely
stuff
happens when you pair up the tuning with cards.
Cool. You got, do you
Cards will
sell
tell
like
you
a
the same
combo,
story.
like a combo package, tuning and
Yeah,
oh,
you save a
sweet.
little bit of money if you schedule them together.
Dope. That's awesome. Sometime I would love to come back, you to come back and talk about that stuff, but this guy is so busy, Chance. He has so many shows on. It might be a while before he's got that time, but I'd love to talk about Oracle and all that
No,
other
we'll
stuff
just
with
we
you.
put it on the calendar for some time, okay, maybe a couple months out, just to give a little space to breathe and for some new and fresh things to come to mind. And be happy to come back, man. I love this, and I would be, if you don't mind, would love to mirror this to my own channels after it's been out a little while on yours, so more people can see it.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be great. I'll put it up probably later today and I'll shoot you in an email.
Sweet,
I don't
man.
really do any editing or anything on just these one stream videos, but I think like, it's kind of just like one and done.
Yep,
No
we nailed it.
editing.
Perfect flow state. Nothing to edit.
I think it was great. It's been basically right on 2 hours. So I hope everyone enjoys this and I hope people go check out your work and support the people on there that you're supporting. And it's kind of like it's this perpetual thing. Like what you did with Dylan, he is really humble and appreciative of what you did, but like he brings it up every time. He's like, you just really helped that guy out, man, getting his stuff out there. And now you're helping us out because he's
That
written
was
more
actually my
books.
intention. When I came
Yeah.
across his work, I said to myself, whatever I can do to get this to more people, that is my goal. And I was able to talk to Jason from Crow 777 about Dylan's work, and they had him on, and the rest continued because I remember he was threatening to not share his work anymore if he didn't get if he didn't sell enough books. And I kind of misunderstood what he meant by that. He was just going to stop doing the online promoting of his work and just whatever. But yeah, I was like, no way, we need this guy.
Cool. That's
And
so
yeah,
great.
it's cool because now I get to call him a friend. And whenever I notice crazy syncretism like that, Jesus is so Jesus's father Joseph's grandfather, or Joseph's father, was Healy. I found that in the New Testament. Healy. What does that sound like? Helios. Okay, so Jesus is the grandson of Healy. Got it. Yeah, I
No
texted him the
connection
other day.
though.
Yeah,
No.
no connection. Nothing to see here.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, check out Chance, InnerVersePodcast.com, InnerVerse YouTube, Rockfin. Support this guy because without supporting him, we wouldn't have all this cool stuff that he's got too. So get out there, support the artists you like, because otherwise they won't be there.
Yeah, man. Well, I think I would still find a way to do it
Well, a
because
lot
it's
of
so
this is
fun.
for
But it's really great to have the support. To be able to do this full time and not have to do other types of jobs is awesome. I was really glad when I was able to make that transition.
so stoked for you, dude. I knew you could do it when I first saw you on Unslaved. Is actually I was like, I went out, I listened to like half of one of your podcasts. I was like, I gotta support this guy because this guy's gonna do something. I could just tell. And here you are, living it up.
Yeah, Michael and David really helped me out a bunch, finding new audience and giving me a platform where I felt like those shows were some of the first times where I brought forward my own research on things and I wasn't just playing host and asking questions. And I was like, man, I could do more of this. And so yeah, I'm eternally grateful to Sarion and David Whitehead. Really, really grateful to call those dudes friends.
It's awesome. Stoked. I'm glad you're here. I hope you come back and I hope everyone enjoyed this conversation today. I think we kind of went all over the place like you do, but I think it was valuable for people.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot. This was really good.
Cool. I enjoyed checking out your next episodes as well, coming up soon. See you, everybody. Hope you have a good day. Thanks, Chance.